Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Neotis introduction to NeoLoad version 6.7. Today, I'll be talking about this product release, some pretty exciting stuff in here. Um, I'm going to go through some slides, do some demos. This will be recorded, so this will be put up on our website as well. There might be some time for me to answer some questions maybe at the end. If you want to ask some questions, please enter them into the questions portion of the GoToWebinar, and I'll get to those. For those that I don't get to, don't worry. What we'll do, we take a recording of who actually asked a question, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. So let me get started. So with this new release, at a glance, we're talking about bringing NeoLoad more towards the left side of the development cycle. So shifting left. We're trying to bridge that gap between development and QA. How we're doing that is we're building the ability to launch and have NeoLoad run as code, and you'll see that in the demo coming up, as well as having NeoLoad work in an API-oriented mode. So those of you that have seen version 6.5, 6.6, you can see that we're progressively moving NeoLoad into this API world. And some pretty exciting things that we've done together with a new NeoLoad web component that teams are able to use and collaborate on watching and pulling metrics from a browser aspect, thanks to all of the APIs that we've been developing for NeoLoad. So this is enabling us to really shift left. On top of that, of course, we've always had the capability in NeoLoad, since I've been here for about 8 years now, for pushing to APM tools like Dynatrace, AppDynamics, New Relic, and CA. Uh, Over the last few months now, we've actually incorporated what we call a bidirectional mode. So that being said, we released New Relic and Dynatrace's integration to actually not only push data to those APM tools, but also incorporate data back into a performance tool, in this case, NeoLoad. So with this particular version 6.7, we've caught up with the last APM tool that is pretty exciting to have this bidirectional mode, and that's AppDynamics. So you'll see a little bit of that as well. Had you asked me a few years ago if we would ever support SAP, I probably would have said no, but we have decided last year to actually POC and really focus an effort on doing SAP GUI. So in version 6.6, we released the ability to record SAP GUI. But more exciting here is we're adding more functionality to the SAP GUI. So you'll see that in a couple of slides here in a little bit of a demo. Together with this SAP GUI productivity that we're doing, we also have enhanced our LoadRunner script converter to handle SAP LoadRunner scripts. So that's pretty cool because now we're opening it up to say, hey, listen, you have LoadRunner scripts that maybe handle other things, and we could convert those with the script converter. That became available a few months back, and it's now incorporated into NeoLoad as well. But we also said, hey, listen, if we're supporting SAP GUI, the market could be using a tool like LoadRunner against SAP GUI. Let's convert those scripts back into NeoLoad. So we now have that capability and some more exciting things around the script converter as well. So we talk about shift left or testing as code. So kind of what's new in this release? What's pretty exciting here is we can now set up a NeoLoad runtime configuration in a YAML specific language file. Okay, so now we can have a YAML file that designates what we want to run and how to push things towards that particular scenario, and have that actually run in command line, or pushing through command line to CI tools like Jenkins, Bamboo, TeamCity. However you want to do it, you now have that capability. So this really enables us to have a really good tie with development teams or automation engineers that are really focused around developing, a text file or a code-based file to actually drive the tests, rather than actually having the GUI and having to create that stuff in the GUI to actually run. So this allows NeoLoad to be faster for the dev teams, having the ability to define those test scenarios, having development teams or test automation engineers have these files, share these files, actually archive the files. Maybe you're using Git, GitHub, however you're doing it, and be able to manipulate NeoLoad for test runs through this. So really, how does this work? Okay, so let me bounce out of here, and I'll kind of show you how this works. So I have some files in here. So I'll show you the YAML file that I'm using here. So I think what's pretty interesting, though, is to show you first the setup in NeoLoad. So here in NeoLoad, you can see that I have some scenarios. Okay, I have several populations, and I'm mapping these against different duration policies and load variations and load generators. Okay, but I really don't want to have to use this GUI to actually launch my test and configure how I'm going to launch it. So I'm going to use that YAML file to do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quit out of NeoLoad here, and I'll go back to explaining that we have this YAML attempt here to actually launch NeoLoad. So you can see here I'm launching a scenario called webinar. Now this doesn't actually even exist in the NeoLoad project. Okay, so I'm creating this on the fly, having a description, and these are the two populations I have, and I'm deciding to run two variation policies here for these populations. Okay, so again, I've defined this here in a file, and this doesn't even exist really in NeoLoad's GUI. Okay. Now what I want to do is actually map this to maybe a command line where I'm going to launch this and have NeoLoad run and kick off this particular scenario. So here I have some examples of some of the command line things that I've put together here, and there's kind of two of them. This is pretty cool because I can now launch NeoLoad and have NeoLoad go out to this YAML file, okay, launch that particular scenario that I'm defining in the file. And in this particular case, this command line is actually launching cloud load generators. So NeoLoad cloud generators are going to launch as the test starts. And I'm pushing all of my information out to the NeoLoad web here. Okay. So that's one example. The other example here is I'm actually using Docker load generators. So many of you might know, some of you might not, but NeoLoad also, or Neotis, provides Docker load generators that you can download from Docker Hub, and away you go. So here I'm actually launching, again, the project. I'm launching that YAML file. I'm launching that scenario in the YAML file. And here I'm actually declaring load generators that are coming from a file that I'm pushing against my two populations that I have, right? So I have two load generators. I'm going to deem one population has one generator, the other one has the other, and I'm also pushing to the web. And if we look back at some of these files, you'll see that, here's the cloud infrastructure that I could use. Again, it's file driven. So all of this stuff is file driven. And if I decide to launch this, I just put this into command prompt here. I paste it in, away I go. And what it's going to do now is actually launch NeoLoad, but dynamically take that YAML file and also dynamically take those two Docker generators, create them, and put them against those two populations. So you can see here it's initializing, but even more exciting, for those of you that haven't seen it, is I'm launching NeoLoad here in a headless state. I'm not actually seeing a GUI run. So am I limited to just seeing this screen here? Or if I was using a CI tool, am I limited to just seeing it say running? I'm not. This is actually pushing now to our NeoLoad web dashboards. So if I come to our NeoLoad web dashboards here, we don't want to see GoToMeeting or my email. We'll come here to the web, and we'll see the actual test here is running. So the web component here is showing me that this test is running. And now I'm able to watch NeoLoad run, and it's also running that particular scenario, and it's also mapping to those load generators, those Docker generators, okay? I won't spend the 2 minutes here to see this, but I'm just showing you that you have this awesome capability now with NeoLoad to do this type of infrastructure code-based rather than GUI-based. Okay, so let me bounce back. After this is done, I'll be opening the project, and you can kind of see what's going on there as well. So hopefully that made sense to you guys. Obviously, this is highly documented in NeoLoad, in the documentation. So there's a lot in there to kind of guide you and help you design some of these things. Now, in NeoLoad, of course, we've supported the ability to do API testing through SOAP or JSON and REST calls. One of the pieces that we knew we needed to develop, and we have, is the ability to import Swagger or OpenAPI definitions from either a file or a URL. Now, this is pretty cool because now you can actually take your Swagger specs, push them into NeoLoad, have NeoLoad actually create the infrastructure here in NeoLoad to actually then push load against these particular APIs. So now you're automating this design and using kind of the best of NeoLoad, which is having NeoLoad variabilize or handle the data in the scripts through NeoLoad's use of frameworks and so on. So it's making it much easier for the discussions to happen and the melding between teams that are building the APIs through the Swagger Open API, and then have those pushed into the performance testing world, okay? And you're speaking the same language, essentially. So how does this work? Okay, so let me show you how this works. So I have a Swagger file, but I'm going to show you here. And by the way, this test is finally finished, but I'll come in here and show you that we have on our SaaS platform, we have Swagger specs to actually pull the APIs. And here you can see all of the information that I would need to actually generate the API tests. And I could create, of course, this stuff manual in NeoLoad, but I'm going to actually import the Swagger spec and have NeoLoad generate it for me. Okay, so I'll launch NeoLoad here. And we have a really easy way of doing it. So we have added some new functionality to the GUI. So you'll see that as we boot up here. So there's a new button that's incorporated on the home screen when you launch your project. So here on the home screen, you can see a new button's been added to import your Swagger or Open API script into NeoLoad. So that's what I'm going to do. So here you can see I don't have any of that stuff in NeoLoad here. So I'm going to go ahead and click this import feature. I already have identified my URL. This is the same URL I just showed you. I can cut and paste that in here. And now I want to actually import this into NeoLoad. So you can see how easy this is to do. I click import and I'm done. So that entire configuration file has now been loaded into NeoLoad, and we can see that right here. And of course, I could rename this if I want to. And in this particular actions are the two main calls that have been converted into these folders. And in here are the actual runtime calls. You can see here I have my API call to access projects from the NeoLoad SaaS environment, okay, and also to do some more information around. But you can see NeoLoad has built all this. We also have taken advantage of some of the variabilization here. So you can see some variables have been defined based on the fact that we know that you might want to push different data in here. So if I go to my variable list, you'll see there's new ones here that have been pushed based on what has been generated from the import. So again, it's now taken advantage of a lot of the features that NeoLoad has for you to be more productive with the product. So again, a really cool way to now finally import Swagger specs. So this has really accelerated us into this supporting kind of the shift left around the test as code, around pushing and moving in Swagger specs and OpenAPI into NeoLoad. So really cool stuff here. All right, let me go back to our PowerPoint. Now, we talked about the shift left. Of course, we don't want to leave out the shift right. So I mentioned this earlier about our support for all of these products that we've had as kind of a one-click solution to move data or tag data that's sent. And these APM tools will absorb that, and then you can understand what's going on within those products. But we also had this notion, and we've worked with these companies to actually build or have the first to actually have performance tools that have a bi-directional mode. Now, we're able to do that thanks to these products, AppDynamics, Dynatrace now with their new Dynatrace app, New Relic, where they're integrated with APIs. And guess what? So is NeoLoad now. So now we have this synergy to actually have this bi-directional mode. So not only are we pushing information to these products, we are actually absorbing information back into NeoLoad from them. Okay, so this is allowing testers or performance engineers or automation engineers to leverage the, in this case, AppDynamics capabilities around monitoring. So not only are you now having the ability to add monitors in NeoLoad as you always have had, but now you can actually leverage APM tools monitoring to push that back into NeoLoad. Okay, so this is giving you that super value of having actionable insight as to really what's going on from a component level and identifying those bottlenecks much faster than you had previously have. Okay. So how does this work? So in NeoLoad version 6.7, you'll notice down here in our actions section, okay, this is where a lot of the custom actions are. There's one in here for AppDynamics, okay, and for APM. You'll also find if you want to access Dynatrace and New Relic, they're out there as well. There's in our documentation, it will direct you to the GitHub locations where these files reside. And then you can just download, or you can just go to our website under the support and you'll find them there as well. And what we do is we actually will move or create a new user path for AppDynamics, and we'll actually move the APM call here, and you're now just calling the AppDynamics infrastructure here through some of the account settings that you would have to do, and also a token that can be applied from the AppDynamics side. So really, what does this get us? Okay, what it gets us is the ability to create back here a performance test or load test by mapping several populations to push synthetic traffic, but also moving against AppDynamics here, okay, with maybe one user to actually absorb data from AppDynamics. So what does this look like in terms of the results? So in the results set, if I look at the AppDynamics test that I ran, if I look at the graphs here, you'll see that thanks to our data exchange API, which sits and waits for external data to actually come into NeoLoad, there's a tab here called external data. In that tab is what, in this case, is coming from AppDynamics. So you can see here, I'm looking at my application infrastructure, and I'm looking at the web app tier and the individual nodes that are there. So I can get right down to, in this case, the JVM, and start looking at maybe current number of threads, what is my current usage on my memory heap, okay, and I could start dragging this information over onto graphs here and start looking at AppDynamics data right in NeoLoad. So I don't even have to have AppDynamics here. I can start pulling data. So this is pretty cool because now you have kind of that bi-directional mode. Teams can now start talking with each other, start looking at the full realm of data that both teams will be looking at. So really cool integration here with AppDynamics. Okay. Let me come back to our slides and talk about the next exciting option here, which is our SAP GUI load testing. So I talked the fact that we have had now for a couple releases the ability to test SAP GUI. We've had some extremely exciting results from our customers out there, some great feedback. This is a much faster way to develop and performance test SAP GUI over some of the other existing tools that are out there. But on top of that, of course, we wanted to enhance this approach by allowing teams to be more effective with taking assets that they already have and not having to reinvent the wheel, right? So we've added the ability to convert SAP GUI scripts that are built out of LoadRunner and use our conversion tool to do it. Okay, so this is really, really cool because it's going to make it easier for teams to transition off of one product onto NeoLoad. Okay, so how does this, well, I'll show you how this works, but I basically have dovetailed these two together, the SAP GUI load testing and the converter, because it's all one topic really. So when we talk about the LoadRunner script converter, let me back up a hair here and talk about the fact that we've made our script converter open source now. So that's really cool because now teams can access the script converter off of GitHub and they can customize it the way they want to. Okay, now in there, of course, is all the stuff that we've designed. We now can cover this SAP GUI script, so we have a wider conversion process. But now we're allowing teams to migrate maybe with some really high-level custom stuff that they want to do, and they can integrate that into the open source script converter, and then they can use that against their project. So again, this is making it faster for teams to migrate off of a tool like LoadRunner back onto NeoLoad. Okay. So again, how does this work? So here, what I have here, since I don't have LoadRunner on my Mac here, and I didn't really want to boot up a VM, I actually have the LoadRunner script here, and you can see this here. This is the action script that I developed when I recorded against SAP. So these are all of the different calls here that are in the VUGen script of LoadRunner. You can see think times and so on in here, right? So I want to actually take this and just convert it really fast into NeoLoad. So I'll move this over a hair here so you can see. I'll bring up NeoLoad. So in NeoLoad, we have this script converter tool. Now you can access this tool by either going, when the home page comes up, you can access it, or under the tools menu here. And of course, again, you'll have the ability to grab this from GitHub as well. But I can just click this script converter from here, and I can just point it to where I have the LoadRunner scripts. So in this case, I'm just going to point it to where I have those LoadRunner scripts. So in my case, it's just on my desktop here, and it's in a folder right here. So this is where I have my LoadRunner scripts. I just select that, okay, and it's going to convert it into a new project. Of course, I can name this anything I want. So we'll call this one webinar. I'll be really creative here, and I'll click the next. So yeah, I'll just overwrite that. That's fine. So what NeoLoad's going to do now is convert all of that into NeoLoad. And you can see here, it's giving you a summary of what it did, what was supported, what was unsupported, and of course, it's going to tell you what's not supported. And this is kind of that custom stuff that you can now go and customize with the open source. Okay. So what do I get when I finish? So I'll click Finish here. It's going to open up this new project. In that project, of course, is the actual now NeoLoad script. So here, I'll bring up that LoadRunner script, and you can see here's the SAP open connection. Here it is here, right there. And here's the string. Okay, so these are the commands that were in LoadRunner are now converted back into NeoLoad literally in a split second. So again, you can see the power of having teams reuse assets and make that conversion much easier for them over to NeoLoad from LoadRunner. Okay, so again, we're really adding some pretty cool functionality into the product, but also giving that cool functionality to you in open source. Okay. All right. So let me, and I'm going to come back to that NeoLoad project, by the way, where I could show you the Docker stuff that I launched. So I'll come back to that. So let's talk about some more new features here. We've enhanced our documentation, certainly around the NeoLoad API stuff that we have. So I'll bounce over to this really quick here, and I'll show you in our documentation now, you have the ability for APIs to see all the different types of APIs we have, whether those are APIs that are directly coming from the controller here or going to the web side of things. And you have the ability to come in here and really explore a lot of different options that you can now see in the documentation, and really getting an understanding as to how this works and how you can customize it for your needs. Okay, so we're really pushing the ability to expand the knowledge around this. All right. Also here is the new SAP GUI load testing guide. So this is pretty cool. We had different types of documentation in there for SAP GUI, but now we have an actual guide in here, and you can see that right here. So here's our SAP GUI testing guide. And this is now incorporated into our documentation. Gives you some prereqs in terms of what you need, how you can record. There's a ton of information here to really get you going on the whole SAP GUI testing side of things. So again, adding to our documentation set that we have. Also, we talked a little bit about Docker, right? And the fact that NeoLoad has had now, or Neotis has had some Docker load generators for a little while. But one of the things we didn't have, which is really cool, and I've been waiting for this one, is a Docker NeoLoad controller, so that we can launch tests through the NeoLoad web using a Docker-based controller. Okay. So again, here I'll show you in Docker Hub, which is right here, you will see if you search for Neotis, the NeoLoad controller. Okay, and this now allows you to have the ability to manage a test through the web by launching this controller that's connected to this web here. So it's really cool. I've been playing with it. It shows you here how to actually get this going. And you now have the ability to start utilizing NeoLoad in a Docker container, which makes it much more expandable for teams. Okay, so you have this as well. Again, on the Docker Hub, just search for Neotis. You'll see all the fun things out there, including the load generators and the controllers and so on. I talked about NeoLoad Web. When we were watching this thing run, we were looking at this in the SaaS platform. So we kind of have two modes of this. We can host it and run it and maintain it for you. But we also have an on-prem version of our NeoLoad web components, and you can access those either through Docker Hub, or there's a one-click install that you can use with Docker command to actually have it install the web components behind your firewall. So you can have an on-prem version as well, and you'll find that in Docker Hub and or on our support site and in the documentation. So it just depends on where you want to go to find it. The last thing I want to bring up here is our enhanced mode for emulation. So some of you have seen it, maybe some have not, but we have had WAN emulation embedded in NeoLoad for as long as I can remember. One of the things that we had some issues around is how do we roll that out to all the different OSs that are out there? Windows being probably the most complicated. With many different versions. We had the ability to get the DLLs in and have that DLL control the NIC card of the machines. Some of the OSs, we just couldn't get around it. We had some development effort and put a lot towards actually getting all of the Windows environments now to support network emulation. So those particular OSs that you couldn't use network emulation, and you would have to maybe get some load generators on other particular OSs, you can now utilize all of the Windows versions for network emulation. So that's pretty cool because we didn't have that capability. Now we do, and you can start using that. Now, one of the things before I leave you today is I did want to show you that that project that I had run in command mode. Not only could you see that, by the way, in the web components, you can see that here. So if I come into the results, you'll see this is the test that I just ran through command line. You can see that here's our scenario webinar. So remember, this scenario didn't exist, right? So here you don't see a webinar scenario. You don't even see those Docker load generators here, but you do see all of that here in here. And you can see here are my two load generators right here that were launched through Docker. Okay, so again, this test as code is huge for me. I love doing it this way, but you can also see this information both back in the GUI, or if you push to our web, you can see it there as well. So some really cool, exciting things in version 6.7. We're going to be progressing NeoLoad as we go along. For those of you that don't know, we shifted our development effort last year to a Scrum methodology. We're releasing big pieces of product every 9 weeks. So it's pretty exciting times for NeoLoad and Neotis as a whole. And you can look forward to some really cool and exciting things for 2019 as well. Okay, so this gives me a few minutes here to maybe get to some questions. Let me see if there's any here. No, so if anybody has any questions they want to ask, feel free to put it in the question section. Oh, I do see some. So sorry, I was looking under the wrong section. So we have one that says, for testing scenarios as code, can we export a scenario from the UI into a YAML file? That is actually coming. It's interesting that you bring that up because when we were actually seeing this as a Scrum session, that question actually came up, is that in this runtime section here, it'd be nice if there was a button that once you configure this, you could actually export this, so you would at least have the fundamental foundation. So that actually went to PM. That is actually being worked on. So that should come out, I would think, in the next release, which is 9 weeks from now. Don't hold me to that, but I know it is coming. So that's a great question. Let's see, another one. Do you also have an example of triggering the test via Docker controller and Docker LGs? I do. I don't have it as part of this demo. I have your email. I can certainly have that set up. There's examples of that in the documentation as well. When you look for launching the controller, Docker controller, and the Docker LGs. My scenarios might be a little different because I'm on a Mac, so I launch it slightly different. But I do have Windows versions as well. So I certainly can get back to you on that one. Let's see. I'll answer a couple more here. Is the AppDynamics data available for use in script during runtime? I.e., ramp the load until CPU metrics have reached 90%. Not yet. I mean, we are looking at dynamically increasing load, through, well, of course, you could do it through the runtime here in NeoLoad, but we're also looking to do that in the web components as well. So I think I understand a little bit about what you're saying. In terms of the AppDynamics data available for use in script during runtime. You can access the data in runtime on the web component. Since a lot of the bidirectional is in the web components, not really in the GUI until after the test is done. You certainly can get it after the test, but if you want to see it during the test, you would use it looking at the web component. All right. I think that does it about now. So if anybody, feel free to put some more questions in there. You can poll your account rep. Should you want a follow-on demo by the tech team, feel free to reach out. We are here to support you guys. Thank you for attending this webinar. I hope that many of you get a chance to really play with a lot of the cool features of NeoLoad. And stay tuned, like I said, for some pretty exciting things coming for next year as well. So again, thank you for joining, and I look forward to talking to some of you in the future.